Well, hello to everyone. Jim Phillips here, giving you this introduction and well, I call it part zero, but it's really the beginning of our class, Winter Without Worries. And it's extremely important that you watch this so you'll understand how this is going to unfold because it's quite a challenge for me to be able to produce this class, and I'll explain why. Now, this series of classes, it's one class, but it's going to be broken into a whole series, is based on years of personal experience, 64 years of my personal experience having done these kinds of things. And I'll make this statement, and you'll hear me say this again and again within the class. If you want to do what I do, and what I'm talking about there is things which very few people can honestly claim that they have done, that they've done it comfortably, safely, without being threatened, and they have taken other inexperienced novice people to do exactly the same thing without any worry about them. So if you want to do what I do, then do what I do, precisely do what I do. And that's why I'm going to be very particular about some of the things I teach. Now, the history is this: 1957, first snow camp. We had winter camp for years. I grew up camping all the time and backpacking. First winter camp, 1957. It was miserable. It was tough. We were doing it, just going and doing and trying to get away with doing things. But the thing you'll see in all the early pictures is fire. Fire is all over. Fire was absolutely necessity. We had to have it in order to really, in some cases, to survive, certainly to be almost comfortable, and I emphasize almost, around fire all the time when we were camping like this and being out, not in the bitterest of conditions, just kind of, sort of winter conditions. But it all changed in January of 1961 on this trip. And it was at this location, which is Puerto Nambe in the Pecos Wilderness, New Mexico. And this is where the beginning of this revolution, this change about winter comfort and safety occurred there. You'll hear about that in this class because I want you to understand this isn't just a travel log as we go along in this or later on when I'm doing the class. You need to understand the principles behind this. I want to have you understand principles. I can tell that it's changing here. This is probably 1963, 1964, 62. I don't know when it is for sure, but I know the footwear in there. That's when we started to make the change. This was the very beginning. This would have been in 62, now that I think about it, when we started using these mucklucks that we had that were unique, but they were terrible to walk in, is the bottom line. Now, by 1967, I had my own my own scout troop and an explore post at the same time. I was going to University of New Mexico, and I'm going to do with them what my father had done with me and the scouts that he led. We're going to take a winter trip. This is January of 1967, and that's my backpack as I'm getting things together. And of course, now we're starting to see some of this unusual clothing show up. And we're going off into the Pecos Wilderness to visit Pecos Baldy Lake and to climb the peak as far as we could. Never been visited before in the winter. And there's no snowmobiling allowed in there. People didn't snowshoe, cross-country ski, or those kinds of things. But we go for the beauty, the adventure, because you can do something that nobody else can do, and it's quiet and you're undisturbed. This is up on the saddle leading up to the peak of Pecos Baldy Peak. And I'm standing in what's probably around a 50-55-mile-an-hour wind. The temperature somewhere around zero, maybe above, maybe below. Certainly the wind chill is well below zero there. And I'm doing this comfortably. I'm doing it safely. And I have my Boy Scouts that have never been out in these conditions before. And I can take them, and I'm confident of their safety. Now, just about 2.5 months, 3 months later, this is Portage Glacier in Alaska. We're on our way to the final snow camp that my dad and I would take before I was going into the Navy, 1968, and he decided we need to have our final big snow camp, and we're going to make it a doozy. We're going to go to Alaska. Heck, Alaska. Let's go above the Arctic Circle, Point Barrow, Alaska, because we had air traffic up there. There was a flight in there twice a week, so you could get in there. And we're up there to camp, to learn, to take a look at what we can find out about the people up there. We were at the Arctic Research Station, run by the Navy and the University of Alaska. And we lived out of doors the entire time, built an igloo out there, had a marvelous time, beautiful environment, a scary environment if you're not prepared for it, but incredible to be out on that sea ice with all these pressure ridges and to walk around to enjoy that. And the low hanging sun, we were there, and it would have been in March, and the sun is above the horizon part of the time, but it hangs very, very low, and you watch these sunsets that last for a half hour or longer. It was amazing, beautiful place to be if you're comfortable, safe, warm, dry. And we were unsupported, living out of our backpacks up there. But you don't have to go above the Arctic Circle to have Arctic conditions. Now, on this trip, the highest temperature we saw was 10 below zero. The lowest temperature we saw was 30 below zero. This is Wolf Creek Pass, Colorado. It's 42 below zero that night. So we've seen colder temperatures in the Rocky Mountains than we experienced up there. However, the thing that's unique about this place is it's what you call a cold soak. In other words, the 2 weeks that we were there, the highest we saw was 10 below zero. The coldest we saw was 30 below zero. That's a cold soak. Most of the time in our mountains and the places down here on the lower 48, we'll see temperatures dip below zero, may go way down below zero, but during the day, most of the time it comes up quite a bit, usually above freezing. I'm not freezing, above zero, maybe 5, 10 degrees. So it's, they see these temperature swings, but we don't see the extreme cold soak that you do in the Arctic. That's part of the reason we went. What if we're living continuously at below zero? So anyway, you can experience these things down here in the mountains and out on the prairies and Montana and Wyoming and Utah, places I've been. Now, we were using crude clothing. You'll see that in some of these pictures. What we were going to the Arctic with is stuff like this. It's homemade. I'll teach you how to do that. You need to know how to do that because, well, you can is one thing. Maybe in an emergency, maybe you need to just get it done. You can build the pants and the shirts and mittens, things like this. We were getting a little more experienced and we were experimenting with how to do this, different ways of putting things together, starting to look a little better, a little more normal, a little bit better here. And this way, learning how to put things together, I'll show you all those different techniques and the best way to do it. And then becoming even more sophisticated in how we built things so that they would be both comfortable and functional for long term. Now, really, it really started with the boots, the footwear. That's where it all began. That one on the upper left there, that's the mucklucks from 1962, 63, 64. And we started changing over to what you see on the right here, because these are just repurposed things we could find in the military surplus. This leather soled canvas top muckluck that you put your boot down into is what you're designed to do. We're lining it with foam, but oh boy, they didn't have a sole on them. That's why the treads on there with ropes and wire and stuff, miserable things to walk in. These that have the vulcanized sole were better. You can still find some of those in the surplus, but usually you only find the smaller ones, which are not that useful. By 1967, I had to make a change for that trip that I took in 1967. You see, my feet were larger than my father's. He had like a size 9 foot. I'm like 11 and a half. And these were terrible. This was better, but still way too cramped. And so I said, I got to build something I'm comfortable in. I don't know how to build a boot, a muckluck, or anything like that. I just kind of figure it out because I have some skills and some tools. And so I'm learning how to do it and made that a footwear that I wore from 1967 until 1984. That's pretty good return on investment is what it comes down to. Now then, the clothing is changing, the styles are changing, it's getting a little bit better. We're learning how to do things. It's starting to look better, and it's performing generally better. We're making sleeping bags. These are 1960, late 60s, early 70s sleeping bags. Building igloos, wonderful thing to do. It's a wonderful skill to learn how to do. Now, for most people, it's going to be hard for them to do that. We'll teach you how to make the snow house that the Eskimos taught us. But this elegant structure of the igloo, this is one before it's all chinked up and sealed up and everything. You can see the spiral on how it's built, and that's the key to it, because it'll stand even before all the walls are up if you understand the physics of both snow and gravity and shape and those things, and it'll stand on its own while you're building it. Staying out there in these conditions, you'll see this picture again in the class because it's to illustrate a very specific point that people will have about, does this really work? And it looks funny, and you're not telling me the truth about temperatures and all. I was given a challenge because I was starting to teach some classes and lectures, and I was being interviewed by a newspaper editor, actually an owner and editor, and some of his writers there. And I was given a challenge because I said you could do things that you can't do with normal clothing, like get wet and it'll self-dry and you'll stay warm. Well, my idea of wet and their idea of wet was different. So it was like chop a hole in the ice, let yourself down in a hole in the ice, get yourself completely wet, and then spend the night, no fire, no shelter. Yeah, I'll tell you that story a little bit more. Now, by the way, this is actually not fun. I did it because of curiosity, a need to know, and what I believed I could do, but I have to find out. I'm not going to sell you a theory. It's what I can do, and I don't want to have anybody think, "Oh, gee, this was fun." This is not a cold water exposure suit. When 32-degree water runs in against your skin, it hurts and it's painful. I drove myself into hypothermia, got out of the water. The temperatures are below freezing here, and I'm squeezing all the water out as soon as I can. But you'll learn more about that because it's part of the physics and the physiology of how this works. Now, there's been a bunch of things written about me and what we've done and what have you. And what this turned into and how it all started out was as Without Fire Shelter. That was the manual, that was the title of the class in 1964. And I kept that title through, I think it was about 2004 or 5 is when the title changed. It was still the same idea, but it kept expanding. First class that started in March of 1984, that's the attendees at that first class. We have a cross section of people. This is not for the outdoor enthusiast necessarily. It's somebody who says, hey, I don't want to stay warm when it's cold and if I lose my utilities. Another class, this was in May, June, and July of 1984. It was interesting because I was in this college classroom teaching about living at 20, 30, 40 below zero. And we were there, it was the 23rd, I believe, of July, one of our hottest days of the year. And it was like 104 outside. And I'm talking about living at 40 below zero. And yet people are there because they're interested in that. Another class, the WOFOS classes that came to be known. This is in Bountiful, Utah, another class here. And then something spectacular happened in 1985. I was introduced to Burlington Industries. Now, not Burlington Coat Factory, but this was Burlington Industries International. They were the largest manufacturer of fabrics in the world, selling globally. A multi-billion-dollar a year company, and they were interested in this technology and what we could do. And there's a whole story behind that. I won't tell you now, and you don't really have time in the class to tell all of it. But we came in there, and we're going to have something that they're going to produce the fabrics. We'll have the designs, and we'll have something that will be spectacular that we can take to people, the military, industry, individuals, and everything. And they knew that they could make this happen because, well, part of it was they had the money. But when I was first in there, and one of the problems they had when we were negotiating, they said, well, we need patents, and you've been teaching this stuff in public domain for years, since 1984. Actually, before that, my father was teaching, and I was doing, not professionally, but I was teaching about this to different groups and lecturing and what have you since the 60s. And they're going like, this isn't public domain. We need a patent. We want to sew this up. So how do we do that? And I said, well, I think if we get the right data and we start experimenting with things, we can come up with something that is unique. We can improve. That's the idea. You can take something that's in public domain, but if you can show that you can improve it and it's not obvious what you did and why, you can patent it. So I said, we're going to need to do some testing, some instrumentation. We thought about cold chambers, all this. I said, no, we need real world things. This is a project manager's dream and engineer's dream to be associated with a company that has lots of cash and they want to spend it on a project. And so I said, okay, we need to get data now before the winter is gone, because we signed the contracts in January and it's going to take a few months to get things together. I said, let's get above the Arctic Circle, way above the Arctic Circle. We're almost 1,000 miles north of the Arctic Circle. This is Resolute Bay, Northwest Territories. We're up there in the end of March and into April, and it's like it's cold still. It's 20, 30 below zero, and we're going to live out up there. But I want instrumentation. What I want to do is I want to be able to start measuring things. See, I can say, gee, this feels good. This is great, wonderful, what have you. But how do I know? And can I repeat it? So you need to have data is what you need. That's what I wanted is data. So we have thermal instruments. We have temperature instruments. That's me with a temperature probe taped on my back, and we have them elsewhere on the body. And we're going to test between different equipment because one of the people we were going to was going to be in the military. So how does it compare to their new ECWEC system? They just spent 13 years and millions of dollars, type classifying. So while we're going to test that, we're going to get measurements. We have these thermocouples on our feet inside the bunny boots so we can take readings. We're going to have them where you get readings anytime that you need them. And I'm getting data on that, on the sleeping bags, all kinds of things, so we can figure out what's unique about our system and can we prove it? Can we patent it? One of the things I got out of this that's priceless is this is a hypothermia curve on my body. We'll talk about that in the class because you need to understand hypothermia, what it is, why it is, the symptoms and those things, how it comes on, how to prevent it. And we're using this funny clothing that I built as fast as I could for the three of us. They're going to be up there. It isn't just me. There's three of us. And we're going to rotate around. This different clothing has different materials and foams and all kinds of stuff in it. So we can get data. What we need is data. One of the things, and that's what I'll be sharing in this class, is why do I know what I know? How can I prove it? Because I have experience. I have data that nobody else has. One of the things we got to do, because we were around the Eskimo community up there, because we've always said, well, we do a lot of things kind of like what the Eskimos do, but we don't use their materials and their designs and everything. And so got to wear the Eskimo clothing and compare how it compares, how it works, how it feels, and start to understand something about it, because we're not going to use what they use because it's not available to us. A lot of work with the military, all branches of the military, a lot of the work with the Alaskan Air Command, the Navy, particularly, and the Marines. Boy, the Marines, we did a lot with them, and the Army, and getting test data with them and field evaluations that were just fabulous. I have hundreds of pages of this stuff. This is Fort Greely, Alaska, with the Army. This is in their test chamber they have there, that you can get reliable temperatures at 60 below zero. Outside the temperatures are up and down all the time. Now when we get 60 below zero, we can hold it at 60 below zero. And we're going to put these guys in the test chamber. Some of them are wearing ECWECs. This guy right here has the ECWECs on. This guy is in PALS, and we have 4 of each. They're going to be in this test chamber, and they're going to sit in there on a bench, sedentary at 60 below zero. And how does it go? Here's ECWECs, here's PALS right here. And well, at 45 minutes, all of the guys in the ECWECs were out of the chamber. And the first one that came out had frostbite. And that's not a good thing to do on a test. I mean, it wasn't serious, but he's got frostbite and they're suffering pain and misery. And I'll tell you more about that, because here again, it's what does the test data show? These guys have thermocouples taped all over them. We're data logging this stuff. We're reading it. And some of the comments of these guys that are administering the test were a hoot to listen to in the comparison of these. I spent a lot of hours in, cold chambers. Fancy name. This is a freezer with a bunch of ice cream and maybe turkeys. I'm not sure. Hanging out in there at 20, 30 below zero, because I need to know that I know that I know and why I know, because I can't teach it unless I do. I got involved in, we needed footwear rather than recycling the stuff that we had. I want to build something from the ground up that will take care of us, at least as a place to start until we can really manufacture something. I had to figure out how to make molds and cast soles and things like that for our footwear. And then we're going to do lots of testing, thermocouples again, all the time. We want data. hard data on different people at different times, different footwear and things like that. This is our little test box that we have. We run this at the average around 30 below zero. You're sitting in a warm room, so now it's just what are your feet doing, and you're not up walking around stomping or anything. It's what does the footwear do to protect your feet at 30 below zero sedentary? Because there's nothing else that's made that'll do that unless the things that have the electric socks and the heaters and what have you. And then what do you do when you run out of batteries? So we have this test box and we're testing things all the time to get data. I spend a lot of times in my office sitting in this cold box while I'm doing my work there because I'm going to get hours of data logging in. So it's like, well, I can say what it'll do and what other competitors' boots will or will not do. So out of this came with those soles that I was making, this big green thing right here, ugly, clumsy, just not very walkable, but yet it's a concept. Let's stay warm first, and then we'll figure out how to make it better, which is what we did. We were able to test in the University of Kansas, their test chamber there. At the time, they were one of the premier testers of mannequins and things like that. So we put, dummies with our clothing, and we're measuring things on them to see what they'll do. But one of the most important things that came out of this Burlington era with these folks is the data that we got on materials about air permeability, about moisture vapor transfer, about density and weights and all these things. And what was it that controlled the performance of the materials? Because the body is going to be what the body is, the weather is what it is. The only thing that we can play with, if you will, and make changes to is the materials and the construction. I have wonderful data from that nobody else has ever had, as far as I know, to say what it will do, what it will not do. A lot of time spent with the Marines, fabulous group of people to work with, from the leaders right down to the ground pounder out there, working with them in the field twice with them up in the Wisconsin winter. Here's one of our pals guys in the early versions right there. Here they are in their Equics. And yeah, they look like Smurfs is what they looked like then, but they were warm and their buddies were freezing their heinies off out there. And we actually had to rescue some of the other guys. With them, this is later on in the versions. We're living with no fire, no shelter on this knoll up in Wisconsin in the winter, and very low profile, no tent, anything like that. We could do things they could never do before because of the clothing and the other things that went along with it, the training, the information, the understanding. One of the last things that I did with Burlington was Mount Washington, New Hampshire. This is again is January of this would have been 87. And I wanted to do some wind testing. We were making some additional modifications and some new garments, and this was all about wind because I'd learned that wind was a real challenge. So I'm up there, again, sponsored by them to go up there. This is a satellite picture looking down on this observation where this big deck is. And this parapet over here, and I show you the picture right here, this parapet, because I spent time up there in that. Here's the peak in the winter and all of that. There's this parapet over here, this weather tower where they have communications and everything. Because when I was up there, we were very, very fortunate. 110 mile an hour winds, 13 below zero. Fabulous if you're prepared. And I'll talk about that in there. And also I made changes to the clothing because of that, some of the items in it. But in that wind out there, I spent one of my nights after the guys who were running that facility figure out I wasn't going to die on them. I wasn't going to get hurt and they're going to have to rescue me. Took a little while to convince them I knew what I was doing because they have people come up there that they have to rescue. I didn't need rescue. I was self-supporting. And they finally allowed me to stay up on top in here in this 110 mile an hour wind living out there. That was an experience because usually you don't get to do that. Of course, 110 miles an hour will blow you away if you're not careful. And they have the 100 mile an hour club, which is you walk across this deck in a 100 mile an hour wind. If you can do it without getting blown down, then you belong to the club. Okay, so that was a wonderful thing. And out of this all came patents. If I remember right, there were 14 patents that we had, very unique things. And one of them that was unique is we had the process patent, not design patents, which is kind of like shape and form, but this is how it actually works. That was a gem to get that. That's what Burlington wanted. Now, unfortunately, Burlington withdrew from the project. I got to see what happens with business and takeovers and things like that, because here's a company that has hundreds of millions of dollars of cash in the bank. They're cash rich, and they were involved in an unfriendly takeover, people trying to take them over. They didn't want that to happen. So they went from having cash, they built a new research and development center, of which I was a part of helping to get that going because of what I needed in there. They spent $100 million on the facilities, and then they staffed it and manned it so that we could make custom things for me and for this project. And so they spent $100 million in cash on that. They had to sell that off, everything else, a lot of other they had, because they went to where they were $2.2 billion in debt. And in January 17th of 1987, remember the date well because it was a miserable thing that happened. They simply said any project that is not in the marketplace turning a profit today is shelved. And so we turned this off. Now, they had already earmarked for advertising. Hear this, when you have money for advertising, they had earmarked $10 million for the first year of advertising to start promoting this clothing that we're coming out with. Heck, you can sell rocks and hula hoops if you have $10 million to advertise it. You can sell anything. And we had something that really worked, was patented, and we could prove it. Well, it came to an end. I got it back. They were a good company to work with. I had a little company that we went in there with, which was Phillips Corporation. We later changed the name to Northern Outfitters. Of course, I had to have a backer in this, and we got them. And I learned some things about business and backers and investment that I wasn't trained in. But our first job was to take the boot. One of the things, take the clothing designs. We kind of had that down, although we needed to finish up the manufacturing and then get them into production. But the boot we had to really rework. Now, that's what the boot looked like at the end of Burlington time, working with Welco Enterprises in North Carolina. I think this is where they were. Anyway, wonderful people to work with. The boot was close, but not quite. It had some problems we had to solve. So we got involved, and particularly my father, in redesigning that boot and the foot tread in particular, in the sides of the boot. That's where the issues were. And so I went through making the molds, doing the testing. And the problem was we had a machine we had access to and that we also wanted to buy that couldn't handle the boot. It was too big. It was too tall. It wasn't designed for that, this Desma. We had to make modifications, not to the machine, but some add-on things to it so that we would be able to mold on this machine, this automated 18-station Desma, beautiful piece of equipment. Now, this is the test equipment that we had back at Welco that we're testing it on. And then we ended up with our own Desma machine, 18-station, gorgeous equipment, expensive equipment, so we can make the boot. And you see the genesis here from 1967 to what we had at Welco and Burlington at the end of 1987. And then here we are a couple of years later. This would have been in 1988. After we reworked it and made it so it really functioned, was walkable, had all the features we needed and wanted in it. Fabulous boot. And in terms of comfort and warmth and lightweight, it was incredible. Here we are, the Phillips Corporation at the Dallas SHOT Show. This would be 1988, if I remember correctly, either December 88 or, yeah, that would have been December of 88, I think, or November, down to the SHOT Show with our boot, the Frostbuster boot. And of course, it's like, how do you prove something works? Well, you prove it works because it does. And people can test it. And so we have our test box there that we use in our own design work. We can control the temperature. You see here it is at 35 below zero. Here's the right foot with a Frostbuster at 89, which for foot temperature is like neutral. 53 on the Brand X boot. Don't even remember what that one is. That is pain. That is misery. That is, I'm going to get out of here darn soon because I can't take it much longer. But people would say, is this real? I mean, we get in the box. Just get in the box. If you have a question, you're a buyer. These are where buyers are going to the show. Get in the box, and then you tell me if it works. That's always been my answer. I'm not going to tell you. You tell me. We have wonderful data on different boots and how they perform, what they do, that kind of real world testing other people weren't doing. When we sold our boot, it came with a manual not about how to put it on. Yeah, that was in there, but that only takes, half a page, but about why the technology works so that you'll understand and you will do it right, because you can actually screw it up if you do certain things that will cause the boot, not the boot, but more the body to fail. So we were teaching all the time. I teach, teach, teach. That's what I do. 1989, Science and Technologies, 100 Greatest Achievements in Science and Technology. This is I think it was the Hilton in New York City to receive one of those awards there. And that was a neat kind of a thing to do. And some of our ads that we had a lot of ads out because we had a boot that would really work and we could prove that it would work. And it would keep your feet warm at 60 below zero. Not 60 below zero because of a theory, but 60 below zero because I used the thing at 60 below zero, and other people have. In fact, temperature's colder than that. So that was our little ad. Even these will keep your feet warm at 60 below zero, the flip flops. The question is, how long? Because these hang tags that are put on clothing and footwear, comfort rated for 60 below zero, what does that mean? It means nothing. What are you doing? Are you jogging, running on a treadmill? Are you, in our case, I'm talking about warm, sedentary, sitting on a stump at 40 below zero, as long as you're doing the other things for the body you need to do. And I'll teach you about that in that course, because you can have frostbite in that boot. You can freeze your feet in this if you do certain things that you shouldn't be doing. So that's the boot. We later changed it to the Expedition Series boot, but it's based on this boot that I built 67. This is one of our students that made what we teach people to make now, or similar to what we teach right now. And I'll teach you how to make that footwear that'll keep your feet warm at 40 below zero, or 20 or 10 or 0 or 10 above or 20 above. Ads on the clothing and things we did. And I had a wonderful designer, Joanne Harlow. Well, she was a dream. And what she did, how she could sketch and think it out and then turn it into finished goods. And these are some of the designs that came out of her shop for me. Just loved her work. I wish I still had her around here. Lots of filming that was done by camera crews and news organizations and what have you. We had the pals on the Iditarod Trail, several people there. Martin Boozer, there he is, wearing the pals. Jeff King, another one of these runners out there. John Suter, Martin Boozer, and I don't remember others. A lot of them, the boots were out there a lot. The full clothing set, not as common. Now, Northern Outfitters, and it went away for me and beyond 1991 because, well, I had investors and I had to learn the rule that he who has the gold makes the rules. And there's a whole story behind that, but I found myself outside my own company, my own patents, my own designs and everything. So, well, this is what I do. And one of the things is my focus had been on the extreme. I mean, the 1-inch pals and beyond and above the Arctic Circle and 40 and 50 below zero, Mount Washington, all this, because I could. And it was a blast. And it was wonderful. And people needed that. We were outfitting people that went to South Pole, North Pole, all kinds of things, and doing things in extreme conditions. That's wonderful. But that's only 1/10 of 1% of the people who need something. Maybe it's not even that high. And so I started thinking about and was kind of led into it because I didn't just go there because I was more focused on all the fabulous, the extreme things you do. Hey, what about living without utilities? What if you don't have any heat, no power, no water? How are you going to live? Now, we were doing that, but we were also if you will, overkill. And this is where in 1991, the thermal johns came from, the TJs. That's the first prototype right there, what it looked like. And it's what you're going to wear underneath your outer shells. You're not going to wear anything underneath it. This is it. It's just you inside of that and your outer shell on it. And they will do a fabulous job. Now, I'll teach you about those and how you do it and everything in there, and also what you can make. The factory made ones, we call them the thermal johns or the TJs. That's the trade name on them. If you're going to make them at home and you don't have the special equipment that it takes to really make them nice, but I'll teach you how to make them on your home sewing machine or how to hand sew it or whatever you want to do. You can do it. And they don't look quite as nice. They don't have some of the features, but by golly, the performance is there. Performance that you need to live in your home when no fire, no shelter. No, excuse me. That's the extreme outside. You don't have any heat. You don't have any utilities. You're in your house. You're sheltered. the temperatures outside are, well, maybe they're below zero, maybe they're above zero. The house is, 40, 20, 10 degrees, something like that. As long as you have windows and doors, your house is never going to get as cold as it is outside, because it's going to get kind of a mean temperature between the nighttime low and the daytime high. That might be, 30 degrees or 20 degrees. Then this is a snap, because I can use these thermal johns. I'll use them below zero, but I don't live out there unsupported with no fire, no shelter. So you'll learn about those things. We had a test that you'll need to see this. You can watch the full video. You get a link to it through my website, JimsWay. Go into the library and the handouts in clothing. And then there's one that's the Thermal Johns freezer test, a little segment of it right here that we'll listen to for a moment, but you need to see the whole thing.
We're at 4 hours, 45 minutes into the test. It's time to get John out. He's going into hypothermia. We have some problems. I've asked Jim Phillips to evaluate this clothing system. Jim, would you open this up and see what's been happening inside the Gore-Tex and the Thinsulate?
Well, the thing that we always see inside of this, and you can see right here, is the amount of frost that's built up on the inside. And if you can notice the wetting that's occurred on the surface of this inner garment, this insulated garment in here, how wet it is. Take a look at all the frost. Now I'm going to slip these off. We'll get you out of here in just a second so you can see this. But look at the ice on the sleeves, the arms, and then take a look at the ice inside of this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bag this up real quickly and all the rest of these things, and we're going to measure how much is in here. Now we're dropping some frost. So John, why don't you go ahead and get out of here, because you're ready to get out, aren't you?
Oh, yes, I am.
John, how are you feeling?
I'm frozen. I'm very cold.
Okay. Go ahead and get out of here, buddy. 4 hours, 45 minutes into the test. We just sent John out. He had been driven into hypothermia, and we're here with Kim. Now, Kim, you came in wet, and you've been working out. You've been doing a little jogging and those types of things, and you've been pretty good all the way through. Mm-hmm. Jim Phillips, of course, was the developer of this system. Now, Jim, tell us a little bit about what happened here today and why Kim's okay and why John was not.
The real story is not keeping people warm so much as how to keep people dry. If you're in for any extended period of time in the cold, moisture buildup is what will get you into trouble. In fact, if somehow we had closed the doors and these two people had to stay in here, John really probably would not have survived. If he had been in here another several hours, let's say 24 hours, within 24 hours, he probably would have died. Yet Kim, although may have been some discomfort and you get tired of being in here, would get through okay, because the moisture's got out, you can stay warm. It's moisture management that is the key, not just about staying warm. Now what we're going to do to finish this off is we're going to take all of her TJs off and what she had on, put those in a plastic bag, and we're going to measure how much moisture is in there. We had a weight at the beginning. Now we'll see what's left. It isn't all gone yet. We weren't in here long enough to get it all out, but a big portion of it will be gone. And the message is, you keep staying in here, it keeps going away. You'll completely self-dry, even at below zero, in conditions like this, which to me, I think is still amazing, even though I've done this for years.
Kim, you ready to get out of the freezer?
I am.
Okay, let's go get some measurements.
Now, it's said in there, and you need to watch the whole thing. Kim went in there. We got her thermal johns wet. Well, we soaked them in water. They weren't dripping wet. We wrung them out so that they're good and damp. She went in there wet, and John went in with the layers of Gore-Tex and fleece and everything, and he went in dry, and they both exercised, and one of them's drying out, Kim, the other one's building moisture. You need to see that and understand what's going on. This is part of the magic of this whole system. Well, children, you got to take care of them, so designs for that. But what do? Toddlers and infants, that's not so hard, because, well, they're not moving around all that much. You can keep them bundled up in there. But what about kids when they're up and running around, the 5-year-old, the 6, 7, 8-year-old in here? So we developed that are adjustable, that I'll say grow with the kid. And depending on the size of the child, from like age 5 through up to about 10, again, that varies greatly in size. We had 2 sizes that would work for them, and then they move into more of the adult sizes, small adult sizes. So we had to figure out how to take care of families and individuals when you don't have utilities, and all the things about having backup heat is totally impractical, isn't going to work. We'll cover that in the class. Okay, experiences with others. One of the things I did a lot of was teaching companies that have men in the field. AT&T, US West, the pipeline people, the Northwest Pipeline. They're in snowcats. Now, it wasn't about outfitting them in this clothing because I didn't have it, but it was all the other things that'll make it possible for them to make it with their regular clothing and how to get better performance out of their clothing and to be sure they're properly prepared. So I spent a lot of time in the field teaching these groups, these companies, so that they would be safe and they're not going to injure men out there. The men might be uncomfortable, but they'll be safe. And of course, the best school is in the school of the environment where they work. And so I did a lot of classes out there in the environment, in the snowstorms, on the side of mountains, in blizzards, and teaching them what to do. A lot of people have made some of their own stuff, and that's great. That's what I'm going to teach you how to do. If you want to do that, then you don't have to buy it from somebody. You make it yourself if you want to do that. If you do it right, it works well. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people that haven't done it right, or they've been making it for other people, and they just heard about how to do it and they made some assumptions. And then I get these phone calls about, I got some of this foam clothing stuff and it's a piece of crap. It doesn't work. And yeah, let me see what you got. Where'd you get it? How is it? And I see what they've done. I say, yep, that isn't going to work because that's not mine. Remember my statement. If you want to do what I do, then do what I do. Here's Snow College. This is our Snow College. This is a wonderful blizzard, screaming, howling, I don't know, 90-mile-an-hour wind. That's our classroom right there. And just packed with snow, and everybody is. You need to see that because I have an interview of it. Here's like the face tunnel that I used here. This is my co-instructor up there, my older son, James. And you can face right into a 110 mile an hour, 90, 80 mile an hour wind. And you don't freeze your face in there because of how the equipment is made and how you use it. Sleeping outside there, you can stay right outside, all wrapped up in the process that we call, you'll see that in one of my videos that you can buy. This is our classroom out there. At night, we sit around and have an enjoyable time, talking. And in this case, we're using some fire because we'll make a little hot water and have some malt and what have you. And it's fun to do these kinds of things, enjoy that environment where most people are afraid of them or suffering, or they have to go inside their tent and huddle and what have you. Who wants to do that? Beautiful environment out there. So our classroom and students there, it's a great thing to do. And some of these people, in fact, in all of these pictures, there's people that this is the absolute first time they've ever been out there doing anything like that. Some of them have never snow camped before. I have no fear of outfitting people when they do it right and taking them there. And they can be younger too. This little girl, I believe she was 6 years old when she went with us that time. Now she's an adult. But it's wonderful to do. A couple more of our students, and you can hear them. One of the things that I've published is an audio interview with them. Now, out of this, and I say it all started without fire shelter. That's where it was. And these classes that I now teach, then some of them have nothing to do with cold weather, but it all started inside of Without Fire and Shelter, of course, about the clothing, but about attitude and your beliefs and how you prepare. So that becomes foundation, all kinds of things about clothing, but also hot weather too, and about cold weather injury and things like that. Water, you have to have water. That's one of the really important things we teach people about. But I started seeing things, or people are saying things about, water purification, what have you. I'm going like, I'm not sure that's true. So I had to dig into that. Sanitation, another big thing. A whole series of classes come out about that because it's not that the information other people are teaching is totally false. It's just that it's incomplete. It only works in certain circumstances. And in some cases, it is really wrong. It'll get them into trouble. Nutrition. Well, nutrition is a part of this class. Without Fire Shelter, it was all a part of that. But then nutrition into other areas and for your health year round. Shelter and wellness, all kinds of things. So all of the classes that I now teach, the dozens of them, this is the short list that I teach and or have other people teach because I'm not an expert in everything, all began in Without Fire or Shelter. And my question, because I'm all the time asking, what if, when I go to a show and hear somebody say this, and this about water, about sanitation, I'm going like, okay, but isn't there more to it than that? What about this situation? When I hear them talking about just the things you need to have for your 72-hour kit. Well, that's why I have one of the classes, 1222, is your 72-hour kit could kill you. By the way, that's published online. You can download that one for free, the first time I did it. But if you get anything out of my classes, it's all because of the foundation that I have. First, my father, who was my first and best friend and hero, and he was the one that was right in there in the heart of this, helping to make things happen. He's the one that came up with the original concepts for this cold weather living, and took me along because I was younger when we were first doing those things. Heck, I was still in junior high on these first snowshoe trips, and I was following along there, learning. He was the leader, and I loved following him. But it also included my mother because she was a part of supporting him and us, and going and doing in later years. She actually started the early snow camps with us as a family, but her arthritis made it harder, so she never made it on any of the snowshoe trips. But she allowed and caused and encouraged us to do that. So it turned into Winter Without Worries. And how I taught Winter Without Worries, and this is hard to what I wanted to express to you, because how I did it, it was always from 1984 until 2018 when I did the last one. It was live in person. There was this class manual that's about 200 pages long. It was show and tell, lots of show and tell. So I had to show up with a lot of stuff, hands-on. We had hands-on skills labs where we'd break out from that. We'd go do things so they'd get the experiences with it. And a lot of things to pass around, touch and feel and take pictures of and try on and things like that. The class series from usually 3 to 6 sessions, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on how we could compact it. But these were marathons. These are 4 to 8 hour classes. I mean, they were brutal on the instructor. They were hard on the students trying to take all this in. And quite frankly, I'd watch people come out of the class and they have their class manual notes and what have you, and they would just about stagger. I mean, they had deer in the headlight kind of stare, like, oh my goodness, because of all the stuff that was packed into them. And we had take home samples for them to take away so that they could, again, touch and feel and compare if they're going to do their own. And up to a total of 28 hours of instruction was given in these things. And that didn't include in the field. Then we would go to Snow College and go in the field. Now, I tell you that because it's like, well, I took a lot of stuff. This is one of the times when I'm just I don't have everything I'd want to have, but everything I could get in this, my pickup here, it's piled on, stacked on, heaped in there. And I just took this a couple of days ago, a picture into the storage unit in my front driveway. And all those boxes, everything down on the left side of that storage unit is all samples and examples for the class, the Without Fire Shelter class. The Winter Without Worries class, old habit, because I called it that for so long. And I would take those things along. And one of my students, bless them, she wanted me to be able to do this. I've had a lot of kindness given to me. And she lent me her box van and trailer so that I could really pack everything along. And then I would also take materials because people got to where it's like, I don't want to go find this stuff, sell it to me. And so I would source the materials, and then we would take it and sell it to them so they didn't have to go out there and scrounge everything. And we took along the sleeping bags and the footwear and all this stuff to show and tell. And here I am, showing this about the footwear again and again, and some of the hands-on classes I was doing in different cities, some of our breakout sections here in Linden with some gluing and all kinds of things. And about materials. Now, I'm a materials Nazi when it comes to doing this. If you're going to do it right, you've got to get the right materials. You cannot cheat. And that's one of the things I see people fail in a lot, is first off getting the wrong materials and then also putting them together incorrectly. And this is my challenge. How am I going to do this online? As me as a one-man crew, that's the real challenge. One of the classes where we have a sewing lab, and I've got to dig out some of these videos that were made, and I will show them. And I may have to edit them. I don't remember what all is in them so that I can broadcast this, because I've wanted to do this for years, to get it out there in part so that everybody would see what I've been saying. And when somebody comes back and says, yeah, I use this stuff and it's no good, and it's like, yeah, well, is it made it this way? Well, no, I got it from XYZ. Yeah, well, okay. So what I want to do is give people enough information that if they're buying something from somebody that I haven't, vetted and approved, that they can ask the questions and they make the decision. If they have the information, they make the decision, yeah, this looks pretty good, or no, that's not going to do the job. And so they can make those choices. That's what I want them to be able to do. I would like to get back into manufacturing. I'm working with some people right now for the half-inch thermal johns to have those done right, but I want to get the whole enchilada being made for the extreme, but and the footwear. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, when I was first thinking about doing Without Worries and broadcasting, I thought, well, no problem. I've been doing this for years. A piece of cake. I know how to do that. And then I started here 3 months back. I started doing some things. I started looking at it, and man, I'm going, oh my heck, this is a big deal. And so I've had to go through, and I'm going through some changes right now. Initially, this will be broadcast over my free Zoom channel. It'll be available to everybody for free. If they're there and they're watching it on live when I'm presenting it, then it's there. It's free. And then they will be loaded into right after that the Provident Living. Well, first off, the Provident Living Times will tell you the schedule that you'd get that each week. You'd watch that so you can show up for them. After each class is done, I'll make any corrections I need to make or fix them, and then they will be uploaded into the members only library on my website. Members will have 24/7 access for study, for replay, for taking notes, pausing, coming back. You don't have to sit there and watch the whole 1 hour, hour and a half segment all at once. You go through half hour, I'm done, come back and get the rest of it. So you don't have to go through one of these intensive, mind-boggling classes. You can take it in segments in that. And each manual segment will be available online in the members only area before each class. I'm just going to put the manual in there in it, and the PDF manual sections will be available for you to download before the class. So now you can listen to the class, you can audit it if you will. You just kind of audit the class and hang in there and listen to what have you, take your own notes, but you won't have the manual, drawing, sketches, lists, and things like that. You'll have to get that out of the members only. Now, so you see, I want you to learn the material. I want you to take notes. I want you to understand the principles behind this. And this is why the advantage of doing it this way is, rather than staggering out after, 3 days and 20 hours of intensive instruction, you stagger out of the class going like, my heck, what do I remember? Well, nothing from the first day, nothing maybe from the second day, maybe what I got today, but where did that come from? Now you can take your time. You do not have to cram, because these were basically cram courses just to get it out, because I could. I loved it when we were able to spread them out over 6 or 7 weeks, one class a week. But if I was teaching in upstate New York or Oregon, you can't do that because, well, I could do it, but the expenses are very, very high. Now the classes have to cost hundreds of dollars. So I want you to learn this material because it may save your life. It certainly has saved some other people's lives already. It certainly has saved my life. But if you know the material, you need to understand it. The manual will be around 200 pages when it's completed, and it's going through revisions now as I'm going. That's when I got into it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to be working on the manual too. And I will do my best to present a segment a week, 1 or more hours a week, so we can get this done. It doesn't take forever, but it's going to take what it'll take. I will use some of the Saturday mornings for a Zoom meeting for Q&A on Winter Without Worries. I'll be there and I'll announce these. So what you've seen the last week, you can come and ask questions, and I'll try and clarify anything that I need to clarify. And I will do that as best I can. But this is intense to get this whole thing out, and it is daunting. As I really got to looking at it, I originally came from no sweat, I'll do what I've done. It won't work. If I had a studio and a staff with sound and video and those things, I could just go through the thing like I've done it, and we could get it filmed with 2 or 3 cameras and some B-roll and what have you. That would have been great. I've always wanted to do that. But right now, there's no money to do that. It's just me on my own. Some changes and adjustments may be required in how and when and where I do it, because like I said, I'm going to try and do a segment a week, but I may run into where I can't, and I'll have to substitute something else that week because I'll be there every Wednesday, or I may be there for a Q&A. I don't know. It'll just have to adjust, but I shall get this done. But your patience and understanding is required because it turned out to be a bigger project than I thought it would be. Now, it's very important that you take sections 1 through 10 in order. Don't skip around. Some people are like, I just want to know how to make the stuff. Yeah, well, I've given those classes before, and they come back with stuff that doesn't work, that fails, whatever it is. So I'm just pleading with you, don't do that. You need to understand, because I'm going to tell you some things. I've had people say, well, nobody else does it like that. Yeah, I know. That's why they're freezing their heinies off out there, or that's why it falls apart. That's why it doesn't work. Yes, I know, because I've made, I don't know that I made every mistake you can make, but I've made a lot of them. I'll try and get you to avoid those mistakes. And if you do exactly what I do, well, and then you can have the experiences I do. I don't want you to skip. I want you to understand what's being presented. And that's why I'll do Q&A, and you can send in questions during the week. And it's like, I didn't understand this, and maybe I need to refilm something that it's just not clear. I'll do my best to make it clear. But then we'll answer questions on weekends like that. And then we have the rest of these sections in here. You need to get them all, because some of them, the order isn't as important about the extreme wear, about the nutrition and those things, but you need them all. And particularly this thing about avoiding winter injuries, that's very important, because I'm going to teach you how to die in PALS clothing by teaching how not to die in it. But I'll show you exactly what you can do, that you can cause it to fail. It's not magic. That's why this is a system. So I simply say, if you want to do what I do, then do what I do. I will do my best to emphasize that and help you do it. Let me tell you why understanding is so critical. One of the things about understanding hypothermia, and when we go through that in the safety area, this is a picture of an igloo. This is a 1971 trip. That is the closest I have ever come to losing my life in the wilderness to the conditions that are around me. And I will explain that to you in depth, how it occurred, why it occurred. There's actually a book. I was asked a year ago to write a chapter for the Civil Defense Manual, Volume 1 and 2, and I think it's chapter 20 or 21 in there. I wrote the chapter. Well, it had to be cut down because he wanted, like, I think it was 10 or 12 pages. I sent him 40 because I'm trying to tell the whole story. He said that's fabulous. He's never seen that much, but he couldn't put it all in there, so it got cut back to it's something like 25 pages or so. But it's in there. That's a good book. You need that book anyway. Now I'll go beyond what's in that book in this set of discs that I'm recommending that you do get if you don't have it already. The Winter Safety Made Real, because in there I go through the hypothermia in depth for that story. We'll also do it in the live class. It isn't like you have to get that, but it's in there along with a lot of other valuable information. So it's understanding that is most critical. That's why I teach what I teach the way that I teach. Lots of magazines written out there, books and those kinds of things. Our class, Winter Without Worries, on the clothing, about safety, the key principles, the PALS system, because it is a system, and the realities of dealing with these things. I recommend, if you don't have it already, get Clothing 2100. Correct Clothing is personal portable shelter. And when I was actually trying to publish this the first time, this was going to be disc one, kind of the overview to it. And then I'd go through and we'd keep, filming and doing these things, but we just never had the resources to be able to do it. And I continued teaching the classes live. We published that, if I remember right, that was in the year 2000. And then some years later, this Winter Safety Made Real, it's 11 hours of audio. It's MP3 audio, 2 hours of supporting video on that. And it is all the principles published in one place, not how to make the clothing. This is not about foam clothing, although there's a little bit in there on its performance and why. This is about safety and working with your layered systems and how to get the best results out of them. But it also will point out why this stuff doesn't, it fails. Layers in the worst of conditions will fail unless you have fire and shelter. On my website, you can go into JimsWay.com, into the free public library there, into the handout section, the little green box handouts, into clothing. And then there's these links right here to YouTube. I already told you this one, the Blizzard interview. You need to see that. 26 minutes of interviewing these 6 people out there, and some of them never been out there before. There's a little bit of the history of PALS. You can watch that, a video that we did. Winter Without Worries experience, that's an audio that would be fabulous. It's in video, but I put slides to it. Compression test of foam, we'll refer back to that. And then the freezer test that I already showed you, 4 minutes from, need to see the whole thing so you get the whole story. I said I'm a materials Nazi when it comes to this. I mean, I am really picky about this. This is foam. In the class, when we did it this way, I had samples that I handed out and they were marked, and people took notes about what it is, what's good, what's bad, why you do, why you don't, those kinds of things, how I test. I'll show you those things. This is some of the foam on my microscope tray in there, taking pictures so I can look down inside because I want to see the structure. Not all foam is created equal. Not all foams work. Some of them are terrible. Some of them will kill you, is what it comes down to. So it's very important to get the right foams. I'll do my best to teach you how to get it. I do right now have good foam available, and we'll make that available to people. It's a real pain to ship. It's much better if you come pick it up. And it's expensive to ship. It's big and it's lightweight. And shipping has gone through the roof. It's crazy. Materials, fabrics. You need to understand those because you can have the right foam and you can screw it up with the wrong fabrics. So those are some of the things I'll teach you. And well, of course, the footwear, it all began there, and we'll talk about this. You'll understand a little better. Yep, those flip-flops will keep you warm at 60 below zero. How long? Not long, but it's better than standing your bare feet in the snow. And then you have all the other boots that people are selling. That this boot right here has a 40 below zero rating on it. That's a baloney tag, as I describe it there. There's the real boots. There's what we manufactured. Here's what you can make. Over here, we'll teach you how to do that. That really will work and take care of you. So the Genesis is from 62.7 to 1988 when he did those. Then simulating that, not having quite the same way to do it, but my student made this one right here out of a kit that I did. I simplified the kit because this was too complex for people to make, and you've got to get experience with it. So I made the kit even simpler, not quite as eloquent, but it'll work very well. So this is where we are now as of 2014 on. Right now, I don't have a kit. Maybe we'll go back to doing that, but I'll show you what's in the kit, why it's in there. And if I had resources, I would make kits. Resources meaning I need physical help people as well as money to do those things. But I'll teach what I can teach right now. And then someday, 20, I would like to get back into the business of making this, but that is a very expensive proposition. I was blessed to be able to do that the first time, and I was cursed when they took it away from me because they had a different agenda than I did. Okay, so PALS is not, you need to understand, PALS is not the foam clothing. Sometimes people think about, I got my PALS. I go, no, you have foam clothing. You have the PALS foam clothing, but you don't have PALS because PALS, it is a complete system that works because the clothing is really at the heart, at the core, at the hub of this whole thing of the performance. And then it allows everything else to work so you can live, well, no fire, no shelter, winter without worries, whatever you're going to talk about in the extreme conditions and do it safely. But you need the rest of the system, or all you have is really great clothing, but you could still die in it if you do the other things. So here we are. And again, preliminary, this is what I was using to introduce people to the class. I've got this now because you need to understand how I have to teach it online right now. If you have those, great. You don't have to have them to come to the class, but it'll clarify some things. You'll get to see some things, and you'll learn a little bit better if you were to get those things, which are available on my website. So if you want to do what I do, that is honestly claim to have done what I have done comfortably, safely, and take totally inexperienced people into that environment. Now, if they're totally inexperienced, I go with them to be sure they don't do the other dumb things they could do until they learn them. And then once they have the system inside them, heck, go above the Arctic Circle, whatever you want to do, it's great. So you need to watch the Blizzard interview. That'll be of those people that are going into these terrible conditions. Then just do what I do is all it is. So ask yourself this, honestly, curiosity. What if something very challenging happened to me in the bitterest of winter conditions? How would I handle it? What would I do? Would I react? And of course, you'll learn from me. You don't want to react to things. That means you're ignorant. You don't know what to do. You want to learn to properly respond. So could I be ready? Could I handle it? Or would I just be a hapless victim? Most people, like in this last winter down in Texas, we had a whole bunch of millions of hapless victims that were struggling. Not too many people died from those things, but they were certainly miserable. They were hurting. But if you'd been through my class and had the things I had, you would have gone there and gone like, oh, okay, power's off. Now I don't have to pay a heating bill and electric bill. This is great. And you just shift over to another way of living and no problem. So we live providently, and that's about making provisions in all these areas. We're talking about winter in this class and the things that are associated with that, because then you can face the future, the winter, the stranding with hope and with confidence, because life happens. There's no doubt that things happen, but how you're prepared will make all the difference. And if you're prepared for the worst, and so we're going to talk about the worst of winter and the worst of conditions, if you're prepared for that, then anything else would be like, Texas, no brainer, easy, nothing to it. True preparedness is based on principles, not just a list of things to buy and stuff that you store, because what you know, what you understand, what's inside of you is far more important than what you have. So my mission is to reach and teach as many people as possible these key aspects of provident living. And that's why I'm publishing what I'm publishing, inviting people to come to my website where you have a link to Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. It's JimsWay Provident Living Today. Do that, or through this link on my website. You can go there. I'm doing little short vignettes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm doing, try to do about 10 minutes, and some of these classes are broken down. I won't be doing this class there. It's too long. Get the register for and get the weekly newsletter that has links to the online classes, the Provident Living Times. I send that out every Monday. By the way, if you have a Google address, MailChimp gets sorted a lot of times into promotions, so be sure you look at those things. It sometimes goes into spam. I like their filtering, except when they filter me out. So you may have to go look for it and then get it in your inbox, and you'll be okay. JimsWay.com, and there you can learn about these things. You'll find the members only section, which is a subscription you join. That's where you'll have from now on the Winter Without Worries segments will be in there. The manual will be in there. I invite you to enjoy. I've tried to keep the cost as low as possible so you can go and you can invite people to go, and it'll be absolutely worth it. The value is way good. $5.99 a month, $5.99 a month, and you have access 24/7 to all these things. There's a lot more coming. I already have a dozen plus things in there, and this will be, another 12, 13, 14 segments and 200-page manual. Anyway, Jim Phillips, wishing you the best of days. I'll see you in the class, either just watching it, auditing it, or you can take the class for real and with the manual through members only. Have yourself a great day. Talk to you again. Goodbye.